Hello, and welcome to the Optimized podcast by VisibleThread. I'm your host, Marcia Watson, CEO of BTW and Company. Today's episode is a special best of one. Over the course of 7 episodes, we've had some incredible conversations with industry experts, tackling the challenges, opportunities, and trends shaping the government contracting and proposal management landscape. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just stepping into this world, today's episode is packed with actionable insights and fresh perspectives. We've distilled our conversations into 4 key themes that capture the essence of what it takes to succeed in this field. From leveraging artificial intelligence responsibly, to the importance of relationship building, to mastering competitive intelligence and adapting to rapid change. We've got it all covered. Let's dive into the first theme and hear from some of the brilliant minds that have joined us so far. Theme 1, evolving the role of AI in federal contracting. The first theme is one that's reshaping every corner of our industry, artificial intelligence. While AI is revolutionizing how we approach efficiency and innovation, it also brings new challenges around security, ethics, and human collaboration. Let's explore how experts are navigating this complex but exciting space.
So let's talk real quick. Before AI, what was the most significant change you'd seen in the industry during your career? And how do you think that has changed the current landscape? I'll give you an example. For me, it was SharePoint 2010. Getting out of email version control nightmares and into the it's checked out by so-and-so nightmares didn't really advance the productivity so much, but it did put that electronic aspect into how we were doing document management for proposal production. But it gave us the first glimpses into collaborative and not serial document development. Teaching those old dogs this new trick was a great advancement, and I know at least 2 people who decided at that point it was time to retire. So what have you guys experienced in your careers? What's been, for you, the most significant change?
So for me, I think it really was just the move to the cloud. I think we used to call it digital transformation. I think we still do. I kind of prefer that term. But yeah, I mean, when things started shifting to the cloud around 10 years ago, I've been an IT consultant my whole career. I actually used to be a professor, believe it or not. Somehow I got into IT. But then around 10 years ago when, Office 365 and that other tools came out, I was like, oh, wait a minute, this is going to change everything. And it really has. But I'll echo something that you're talking about to just one more thing. This is a specific feature that technology has enabled in the last few years. It's the simultaneous editing of a document at the same time from a team perspective. That blew my mind. Still does. That more people don't use it. I guess Google really started it, right? I mean, it was just you're sitting there typing and someone else is typing, and at first it it was kind of a change management issue. You're like, oh my gosh, people are looking at what I'm typing. I'm going to get instant feedback. But now it's just so ingrained in how you work, right? Is that everybody's working on the same document at the same time, and it really does speed things up. But I think that's great. But yeah, the whole transition to the cloud and the improvements to the applications that came with that transformation, that's a huge deal. Still is.
So I'm going to flip the conversation back now so that when the humans are using these tools to create their answers, shortcut the process for sure. What has to stay in the human, area? There's, 80 out of 1,200 pages. That's fantastic. Let's flip it. Now the government gets that document back. How do they know what of those 1,200 pages was the original human thought? How do they know what was automatically generated because of the efficiencies that it gains? And how does it differentiate between this is a standard answer, I know I can accept it, or, I know that this answer needed a great deal of consideration. How do I know that it got it? That's very existential, I think, in some ways. Fergal, where do you kind of see that gray area between what the humans are creating and then submitting for evaluation? Not yet thinking that the government is using AI to evaluate. We're still thinking they're using humans, at least for the next 2-3 months.
Oh, no. Wait, we can talk about it later. Yeah.
I'm going to think from a majority. They haven't picked it up yet, but the lag is not far.
So I'm going to give a controversial and slightly contrarian answer on this. It doesn't matter. Why the heck does it matter? And I'll give you a simple analogy. If I do a complicated math sum and I use a calculator or pen and paper and I give you the answer and the answer is correct, why would you care whether it's done using a calculator or by hand? So it is impossible. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding in the world of politicians, particularly around the regulation side of AI. The task order that came out last year had certain, let's call it interestingly strange and brittle tests in it that are already like dark age stuff, particularly around size of models. It's just a naive approach. This is a personal viewpoint, by the way, not an official viewpoint. But it doesn't matter, because the other point that I don't think people understand is that in general, there are some minor exceptions, but in general, it is impossible to detect AI-generated content. Because let's strip it all back to the basic principle by which Gen AI works. I've got a sequence of words. So I always use the example, the dog chased the fill in the blank, right? So the dog chased the cat, or the tiger. In the case of Noel, we're very big fans of tigers, so maybe the dog is silly and is a puppy and hasn't a clue what it's chasing. Or is it a bird, or is it a car, or is it a bus? They're all right, but it just depends. So all it's doing in essence is fundamentally predicting the next word in a sequence of words, or if it's something like a Sora or kind of a graphic stuff, it's the next pixel in a sequence of pixels, which is what, how photos and movies are created. It's pixelization. So how can I possibly detect whether that next word was written by me as a human being using a pen and paper or in a word processor, or created by AI? It is not possible. So watermarking, which is an idea in the task order, was, again, the task order I'm referring to was about late 2023. And Noel, I'd be curious if you have a similar view. I'm not sure, maybe I'm being controversial here, but it's just silly. It's just not technically feasible. So in some ways, yes, I know that NASA Soup are saying, did you use AI? And you know what the stock response I would suggest that people do? Yes, we used AI for certain activities, namely editing content, tightening up content. If you've ever used Microsoft Spell Check or any of the Microsoft...
Like literally, if you're in a product, you're going to have to check that box.
You are
like
using
any
AI.
Product.
And then we could get into an esoteric debate about whether it's old style AI or a different type of model in AI. There are 20 plus different types of AI. And then you're just on a losing battle. So you just put in a stock. We were responding ourselves to an RFP, and we put in the stock disclaimer. We used AI for certain activities, including editing and simplification of content, including initial first draft creation. Done. It doesn't matter. The government, on the other hand, should start, and is already starting, to use AI themselves in initiatives. Now, again, the government in various ways wouldn't be known for its innovation, but in certain parts is highly innovative. So that for sure is going to happen. There's going to be a down selection, or there will be parts of the down selection process and parts of the ultimate selection process which will leverage and lean on AI to inform, just like we're informed on the sell side, they will be informed on the buy side. That, make no doubt or make no bones about it, is definitely happening.
But it is definitely happening.
As long as we're all more like, if I submit an RFP as a response and it has statements in there, if I can't deliver on those statements, that's my fiduciary duty. That's my operational imperative. Like if I say I'm going to land a person to Mars in under 2 years, and it was either written or generated by AI, I still have got to freaking land the person to Mars in 2 years.
You get them on the space station, but can you get them off?
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's not go there. The
RFP needs to be very clear about it.
Although I believe Elon is now to the rescue, so we're all good.
Of course he is. Different topic.
Let's not go that direction either. In any case,
but
that's
not getting into commercial
contrarian.
Space travel on this.
Correct.
But let's get back to
I'm kind of curious. Noel, would you agree with that? I'm kind of curious of your view on that. I'm not sure
I was very happy to hear you say that, because I was like, I wonder what he's going to say. But yeah, 100%. Like when you made that kind of proposition of like, if the government spends any time at all on what it should do is enlighten them that 80% of their process is not usable. It's not useful use of human time. That's what it should do. Because these pages, like many of these pages, require zero changes over time. Like every time you submit an RFP, there's pages that never change. And those pages you should evaluate, like, why are you submitting those in PDF format? Oh, right. And or even physical paper format? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. So it's really more of a trigger to organizations. But yeah, I 100% agree that I don't think it matters at all. And in a world where what it reminds me of, especially because Instagram does it too, is how little organizations understand about what the letters AI means. Because when you say AI, I'm like, we've been using AI for a very long decades. Many of us at least 10 years to do all sorts of things. I mean, every time we have a conversation and Instagram pops up ads based on a conversation we had, like that is not a human doing anything. That's an algorithmic response. Like, and it's been happening. So yeah, I think it's weird if like, organizations like, did you use AI for this? I'm like, well, what part, which one? Was it in a product I owned? Did I have control over that? Like, it becomes a very slippery slope. So yeah, I don't think it's a really great question. I think it might be good to have in every contract, how was AI used in the creation of this RFP, which is what you're doing proactively, right, Fergal? But I think having that checkbox, it actually is unfortunate because the people that have a very good idea will now be intimidated by that. It almost is like AI shaming in the form of responses. So people will be like, well, why do you want to know? If you want to know, maybe we shouldn't do that. And now they will be at a significant disadvantage. And then it becomes an ethical choice. Do you check that box or not check that box, knowing very well everyone is using AI? If you're using Word or Google to write your documents, you're using Adobe, they all have AI embedded. You can't get away from it. So asking, I mean, I don't know, is it more about like an ethical check on like, are you going to say yes? Because we know you are. I don't know. I don't understand why we would ask that question. Yeah, I think it's a misunderstanding of the asker about what they really want in an answer. So I think it's really good advice to provide a disclaimer on everything that you do on the use of AI. And this goes to maybe what you're going to talk about with ethics. One of the pillars of ethical and responsible development is to be transparent, not only in your use, but in how you build, both as a consumer and a producer, being always transparent about how AI is being used. And it helps in two ways. One, it allows everyone to realize using AI is okay. Like it normalizes the use of AI instead of being like, I secretly use ChatGPT to build this thing. He. Like I see so many companies doing that. I'm like, normalize it because bad things happen in the dark. Like, don't put it in the dark, put it in the light. But the other thing, of course, is that being transparent allows an organization to choose appropriately whether or not they want to use the AI that you're talking about or leveraging. It gives everyone the ability to make a conscious, intelligent decision about transacting. And right now, I don't feel like we're being that open about it, which is odd, especially because the model where many of us are using is called open AI, like anyway.
Right. Obviously the AI is going to be another thing that needs to be regulated. So let's touch on that because we can't have a podcast without talking about AI. Just in general, because I've always said, and I don't want to be on this topic long, I've always said that the risk for the proposal industry and business development industry right now with artificial intelligence, I have two philosophies on this. One, when you have artificial intelligence suggesting your response and then artificial intelligence evaluating your response, that kind of takes a lot of the, technical human elements out of it. Is the government looking at that in one way? And then in the larger, just how AI has become so prevalent in our conversations. And in another podcast, we even talked about the load of data that is required for an AI response and the environmental impacts of being able to run AI servers and those sorts of things. Do either of you have any insights or perceptions into what kind of those perspectives are inside either of these administrations?
I have some concerns about how we will approach this. I recently sat on an Axios editorial board that was about the intended path of regulation for AI. And the consensus in the room among 25 experts was that the government would likely go down a similar path that they did with regulation of cybersecurity, which is to say it will take forever, and they will put the burden on small business to pay for whatever sort of compliance is required. I will say I was a lone voice at that table that said you cannot do this to small business again, expecting them to pay for the security concerns these are national security issues, and there should be some government support for that. I personally thought that bringing the likes of Elon Musk and Bill Gates and other luminaries to the table with Senator Schumer and other senior congressional leaders, that's exactly the wrong way to approach this. There are some AI leaders at the very highest levels of big tech, but in terms of regulatory implementation, this will be years, if not decades, of policy reconfiguration. This will look like tax legislation, in my opinion. There will be so many nooks and crannies to it as we go along.
And we've definitely seen that already starting to happen with agencies, each doing their own AI approach, their own AI reviews. Congress kind of got into the AI game and acquisition a little bit late, but now it's furiously playing catch up with bills that they introduced in the spring and summer this past year. So I would expect to see some forward movement on those. But I think the word patchwork is one that we will hear a lot more. President Trump has said already that he will not abide by that, and he thinks that AI executive order is overly prescriptive in terms of not supporting innovation and broad thinking. Not sure what that would be replaced with, but certainly there are two different minds there from each candidate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for everybody, there's probably, many different opinions on this subject, but I've always said, until it's regulated, use with caution.
Theme 2, building strong relationships in government contracting. Our second theme underscores a timeless truth in contracting. Relationships are everything. Whether it's connecting with government representatives, contracting officers, or your own internal teams, cultivating strong partnerships is critical for success. Here's how our guests advise doing just that.
Proposals are not easy. They take a long time. We wish that we could spend 18 months on them. We're lucky we get 18 days sometimes. So let's switch the topic over to that a little bit. There's a lot of hurdles to overcome. There's a lot of just things to know and understand from the fundamentals of what it means to be a federal contractor. That kind of, from that Apex Accelerator perspective, what are some things that small businesses new to the market might not completely understand or appreciate? What do you see are kind of most frequent light bulbs coming on, or, okay, now I'm like, what do you think small businesses don't quite know or understand but once they do, they kind of have that leg up?
No, that's I'm going to give you two answers to that. I'm going to say one, once they finally understand that this is not an endeavor you engage halfway. This is really an endeavor that engages proactive, aggressive approaches. If you think you're going to do this on a part-time basis, your chances for success diminish considerably. I find that my clients that have the most success have a dedicated individual, if not a dedicated team, that apply themselves on a daily basis to making their company successful in the government marketplace. So that's number one. Number two, what was number two, Marcia? I talked myself right into a full circle on that one.
Yeah, what revelations kind of take it from the I don't think I can do this to, oh, now I get it.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much, Marcia.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that assist. So notations are posted digitally and responses are posted digitally, and there's no human interaction. The companies that become successful realize that this is a human interaction driven endeavor just as much as anything in the commercial sector, perhaps even more so. Developing those relationships with the end users, with the contracting, with the procurement specialists and contracting officers, with the small business liaison officers, with the prime contractors, that's so important. And once they realize the importance of that human interaction, I see companies take their game to a whole new level. I referenced earlier that, contracting officers are human beings, and some people tend to forget that. So as a human being, what they want more than anything else is for their lives to be made easier. So if you simplify their existence, if you make their job easier by doing exactly what you are contractually obligated to do when you are contractually obligated to do it, you're going to be offered that option here. It's that simple. The more difficult you make their existence, the less likely that they're going to offer you those option years. They don't want to make a change. They don't want to release that RFP again. They don't want to go through that process if they don't have to. They want their life made easier. And as long as that end user is happy with the product or the service you're providing, and they give good feedback to that contracting officer, you're going to be renewed.
There's different personality types inside of this industry. And I always joke about, the optimism of a business developer versus the pragmaticism of a proposal person. And those, again, it's nature versus nurture. They either came that way or they became that way. It doesn't matter. They are that way. And having those two-sided conversations with polar opposite perspectives about the exact same opportunity that, a business developer can come in and say, I know we're going to win this. This is ours to lose, da, 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 da. And the proposal manager saying, why? What are your proof points? What is the information that you have? And the disconnect becomes truly doing the work. And it really becomes, I know that you think that this is going to be successful, but and not to pick on business developers, but to say, but you didn't give me anything to put in my proposal. I can't work off hope is not a win theme. We say that all the time. Or, if everybody just thought they were going to win, not to negate what you're saying, but it's like, you do have to do the work. You do have to understand what your responsibilities are. So again, how do we drive ourselves to get a little bit of that balance between the optimism, totally for it, and the understanding of our own objectives and the ability to meet the expectation of somebody else? And I'll give you kind of a scenario, right? So in most proposal activities, we're going to do a red team review. You stop what you're doing in the middle of proposal development. You're hoping that you're 80 to 90% written. You've got all your concepts down, but you're really looking at, are you compliant to what the government is asking? Are you compelling in that you're telling a great story and you're ghosting your competition and you're justifying your price and you're justifying your salary? All of these things, they're very intense, nuanced things, and they have to be addressed and discussed differently. And then they have to be reviewed by people that not only understand those rules and guidelines that we're trying to follow, but also have this perspective that it's fine because it exists. It's good because I said it. And so how do you balance that as the individual who's literally trying to balance I get that you think it says that, but it doesn't. And the person who's like, but it does say that. How do you draw people back into a little bit more of reality in when they have the optimism, but they don't have the activity?
Right. Yeah. And that, the optimism, the positive thoughts, the cleaning up, all of that, they're not saying don't do the work. They're not saying, what they're doing is letting you come up with what we call, and what the coaching I learned is inspired actions. So you're basically cleaning up your negative thoughts, releasing the negative beliefs, releasing all the limiting decisions, coming from a positive mindset. You're basically cleaning all the junk out. That opens up new possibilities, that opens up your eyes, lets you focus more, that helps develop your relationship with other people because you've gotten rid of all the junk that's affecting that. And now what that does is it lets you put together true SMART goals. It's interesting. In the SMART goals, there's the typical SMART goals, which is what is it? Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-based. But then there's also the SMART goals. We call them SMART goals with a twist. They're a little bit more like holistic goals, in that your SMART goals have to be sustainable, meaningful. So instead, not just measurable, but they need to be meaningful to you. They need to be, I forget what the A is, but the R is responsible. So they need to, so they're kind of,
they're less verbs and more adverbs. Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
Yes. And when you think of it that way, you actually can see the goal is clean up all the stuff, get your mindset in the right place, let go of all those thoughts and behaviors, live in a place where you're not blaming and shaming, but instead you're looking for inspiration. And when you do that, you can come up with inspired actions to get to the task. And then you write them down and you put them, and you figure out an actual work plan. And it's a way that, you're using that optimism to come up with new ways or better ways or more efficient ways to do things, including communicate, including, figuring out if someone's saying this proposal is going to be successful and someone's saying, I don't have enough information, coming together to figure out, okay, what is it that will make that proposal successful, and how do I get that information? So you're doing the work, but you're doing the work in a smarter, cleaner way that you can come up with better ideas and more opportunities and things that you didn't even see before, because the collaboration is better and you're looking outside the box. You're looking for more creative ways to do things.
Theme 3, competitive intelligence and capture management. Next, we turn to competitive intelligence, a crucial tool for staying ahead in the ever-changing landscape of federal contracting. From analyzing market trends to crafting data-driven strategies, this theme dives into what it takes to outpace the competition.
So let's talk about specifically subcontracting and competitive teaming, the risks and mitigations associated with establishing teams. We've kind of talked about the contracting relationship there, but from strategy and government contracting, navigating competitive teaming dynamics, how do you get that early awareness of those subcontractor requirements from a statement of work perspective, so that you can make sure that you're pulling in the appropriate teaming partners, that they will be compliant to these requirements? So Dolores, I know this is kind of your bread and butter area as well. So what should contractors consider when forming teams, and specifically about that diverse pool of subcontractors? What are your advantages there? What risks are we mitigating in how we establish these teams?
Yeah, I mean, I love this question because I think it definitely helps in you deciding if it's something that you can go after or not. As many of us are looking at a lot of the requests for information that are popping up right now on the industry side, we're trying to determine, hey, is this the type of work that I'm able to support? Is there a compliance issue that I might need to consider? Is this a set aside? Meaning, is it going to be, towards a small business, or is this going to be for a woman-owned small business? Which way is the government leaning? So as companies are looking at that, and they're looking at their capabilities, if there's some kind of gaps that they have in those capabilities, that should give you a marker of, I need to find a subcontractor. And we are human. We have our favorite people we like to go to see if they're able to support the effort, or if it's something among their capabilities. If not, a lot of people are using LinkedIn to find companies, look at some company briefs, websites. There's a ton of tools that also allow for that as well. But in general, when you're trying to figure out who do you want to team with, it all starts out with what opportunity are you going after, and what is the government leaning towards? Are they leaning towards a set aside, or is it going to be a full and open? Is this something that they're looking for non-traditionals to help lead, depending if it's research and development or prototyping efforts? And then deciding, are you going to be the prime on it or the lead on it, or are you going to be the subcontractor? And you're trying to find your highest probability of win based on who you're with and what role you're playing. If you've gotten through that decision matrix, then you start deciding on who you're going to go with. And this is where, if you're entering into unfamiliar territory, this is where you get to test the relationship with different organizations. See who is, during negotiations, that's your first test. So that pesky NDA that as contract managers want everyone to sign before having those conversations, it's really your first test. How willing are they to accept, you wanting to protect your intellectual property? How willing are they willing to accept what you want as dispute resolution, or how you want to handle if any information gets, handled improperly? It's your first sign of, do I want to work with this person or not? Especially if all of a sudden you get an NDA that's 46 pages, you probably are going to be expecting a very long subcontract or a very long teaming agreement. So it gives you kind of signs from the very beginning. And then you see where there's some synergies. And I think that's where you spend a lot of the time. And that's where a lot of business development folks spend a lot of their time. And you start kind of, I think Kyle talked about it, is creating a matrix for teaming and seeing who can meet those capabilities where you have gaps. Where can they complement you? Where can you split the work? Is it worth for that company for you to subcontract, or do you need to hire someone? There's a lot of complexities that goes into teaming, especially when you're deciding, this is the effort I want to go to. And that's where, again, at every stage, you do a no bid decision. Like, is it still worth going after? Yes or no? Yes, it's still worth going after. Let me go to the next step. Is it still worth going after? Well, now we're looking at having 6 teaming partners. We're splitting the pie a little too much. Maybe we say no, and we see if someone else wants to lead the effort. So there's a lot of strategy that goes into it. So having a really good BD or capture person that can start that very early, not when the proposal hits, or not when the solicitation hits when you're writing the proposal. Do not start that. Start, when you hear about it on the industry days. Start when you start getting the pings on LinkedIn of, hey, big announcement, we're going to be posting this solicitation here and here. Start then. Look at the budgets, look at the, policy documents when they're talking about some programs that these agencies are going to push out. That's when you start. If you're starting when the draft solicitation's out, that might also be too late, because most likely there's already teams that are formed as well.
But let's then talk about, how do we get those facts caught into our own corporate discriminators? And how do we use that information that we've collected in drawing out what that means for us and our company?
Yeah. So here's a good one. This isn't necessarily something that we've done, but it's something that I would absolutely do if I saw this. If you see a contract awarded on April 3rd and on April 6th, April 30th, you see mods, and they're mods around adding funding or already extending period performance, their transition has not gone well. So what you can do then is say, in your technical approach, here's how we execute transition, seamlessly. We have the ability to do X, Y, Z. Here are our incumbent capture rate. Here's what we do to mitigate risk and mitigate schedule risk. And we can turn this 100-person contract on in 3 days, right? Whatever. That's unrealistic, but you get the point that I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, alternatively, even without, if the benefit of incumbency can be leveraged as well, right? So if you're the incumbent and for whatever reason, the customer decides to put it out on a vehicle that you don't have access to, you can still find somebody that has that vehicle, team with them, and bring the workforce. So you can say, in that company's proposal, your prime, the prime can then say, we have the lowest risk transition because we have the incumbent on our team, right? We have the ability to turn this on day one. The risk of low performance is almost nothing because everyone is badged, everyone is in the system, everyone is doing the work today. So you really drive a transition risk down a lot, and especially in some of your higher mission importance places within the DoD and within federal health, that's critical because there can't be a lapse, right? There can't be a lag in service. I mean, if you're doing acquisition support for the Forest Service, it's probably a different story. But if you're doing, mission support work for Army Cyber, then they really can't have an off day.
Well, and again, along those lines, it's being able to know without a doubt that your company is the best company. And I will tell you, anytime a business developer ever said to me, this is ours to win, and then I said, who is your competition? And they can't answer, it's yours to lose.
Yeah.
Because somebody else knows that you are their competition.
Yeah.
And that's the other side of it. How do you use what you know other people know about you? This is the whole SWOT analysis, right? Maximize your strengths.
Right. Weaknesses.
Yeah. So how do you use competitive in that assessment to kind of look back inwards of your organization?
So you can use competitive analysis on yourself, really. And in politics, they call it oppo for short. But it's research. And I'm completely spacing on what that means. But it's research on yourself from the opponent's perspective. And you can absolutely turn that around and do that to yourself. So if I said, what do I do wrong? And I've been toying with the ideas of things like premortems. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but it's essentially put yourself the day after the award is announced. Why did we lose? Right?
Yes,
and you
great
can sit there and you
tactic.
can say, well, we lost because our price was too high. Okay, so how do we fix that? We lost because our technical was too aggressive. Okay, so where do we beef up to make sure the customer is comfortable with the approach? Or alternatively, we don't beef up. How do we communicate with the customer now to make them comfortable with this approach, right? How do we say, yeah, we don't need 3 risk management people, we only need 1 because XYZ. And then you don't just write it in your proposal. You go to the customer and you have that conversation. You say, hey, look, I know that your draft PWS says that you think that there need to be 3 of these people, but realistically in our experience with this customer, that job can be done by 1, and here's why. So that kind of ghosting yourself almost is important. And if there is an unescapable problem within your company and within your past performance, sometimes it's best to own it, right? You look at it from a parental perspective. I'd much rather my kid just came to me and said, hey, look, Dad, I screwed up, than trying to hide it, because they're going to find out, right?
Mm-hmm. They will.
There's a fun clause in every RFP almost that says, the government reserves the right to look at any information that it has, not just what you give us. So if there's a problem, I'm not saying put it in flashing lights, but acknowledge it and explain how you handled it. Because customers are interested in knowing innovative problem solving when things go wrong as much as they are high performance when things go right. Good times are good for everybody, right? Bad times and how you handle them are really important to demonstrate. And that can eliminate a ghosting opportunity on your competitor side, because they may know about it. And if you've up front said it, hey, look, we screwed up and here's how we handled it. We worked with the customer, everything got back on schedule within 6 weeks, and everything is good now. And we've been successfully performing now for the last 3 years. After that one hiccup that was caused by XYZ, I don't know, our program manager got hit by a car and it was terrible, but we solved it.
Right.
Things like that.
Theme 4, adapting to rapid technological and cultural changes. Finally, we explore how rapid changes in technology and workplace culture are forcing all of us to adapt. Whether it's hybrid work models or generational shifts in leadership, staying agile has never been more important. Let's hear how our experts are navigating this new normal.
Taking that spin, Fergal, as the founder of a company focused on RFP software and working with 11 of the top 15 government contractors, how have your largest customers approached AI?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, Marcia, and I think it's kind of very variable, and it's somewhat emblematic of what Noel just talked about. I kind of look at AI almost the dark ages of AI. AI has been around for 40 plus 50 years. I mean, Alan Turing coined the idea in the 40s and 50s. There have been a ton of false starts in AI. Just technology that promised a lot, probably oversold to an extent, but didn't quite deliver the expectation. ChatGPT arrives on the scene November 2022, and introduced a certain type of AI called, basically based on a thing called a transformer model, which effectively originally was invented by Google in 2017, but they kind of let it sit on the shelf, and then OpenAI kind of used this technology to make some really interesting and powerful results, and it really cut through the noise. So that kind of brought almost this unprecedented attention to what quickly became a very hype cycle type thing, which doesn't mean it's all bad. It just means that there was a huge amount of excitement. And then the question is, well, what can it really do? So as we work with enterprises, I think they're at the what can we really do with this thing phase. And the progression from a technology standpoint is phenomenal. So what we're seeing is that the most thoughtful leadership in enterprise, we work a lot with, well, small to medium business, of course, and mid-size and enterprise, but the big enterprises, they are looking to standardize their kind of large language model posture. They're looking to put together the infrastructure, the scaffolding that will allow them provision this internally. They have a huge concern about security and the implication of PII, personally identified information, going into the models. That's a huge concern, irrespective of whether it's valid or not. And most serious kind of companies operating in this space of government contracting already have a pretty good posture when it comes to kind of privacy of data. And I think what's slightly different in this ecosystem that we operate in is that you really can't use public cloud AI, generative AI, irrespective of how fantastic it is. Once you put anything into the public cloud, the alarm bells go off for information security. Enterprise get concerned about that. So the most thoughtful leaders are actually provisioning internally. That would probably move to, internal private clouds. It'll probably move to Amazon provisioning, turnkey approaches for private clouds. But they're controlling their own data. And security is job number one for these guys. So you can't, if you're doing defense and space, or you're in kind of healthcare and HIPAA constraints, or you're in, compliance, financial services type activities, you just can't take the risk. So you can't just kind of willy-nilly whack things into the public cloud and expect that to be okay.
How do you trust that your employees, your folks, your workers are not going to go into that public cloud, because it is such an easy button right now? And how do you put those things out there of yes, but, or no, and, how do you get those things communicated, understanding the risk in, what the implications are of putting, business data into the cloud?
100%. Yeah. I think one of the things that I've witnessed over hundreds of conversations over the last 2 years is CEOs are like, first, they were like, help me understand what we're dealing with here, so that they could just even conceptualize, like, are we going to do this? Are we not? There was a lot of hemming and hawing over whether or not it's a good investment. But now we know, the IDC just recently re-reported a study that they finished at the end of 2023, but now as we close into the end of 2024, have now re-released this study that's confirmed that for every $1 you put into a responsibly built AI system, you can get up to $3 back conservatively. And that there are even some specific use cases where you can get $8 back. Like, that's ridiculous returns. But the key is in, the devil's always in the details, right? How do you ensure that you're building a system that is responsibly built? And that what that means is that, these CEOs would always ask me, how do I make sure I build a system that won't hurt me, won't hurt my customer, that I won't get fired for using, that how do we make sure that these organizations are set up for success as they go on this potentially new journey, certainly away from the research grounds in which a lot of this was started? And the number one thing I tell people is very easy to do and it actually kind of builds on top of what you said, Fergal, is the opportunity that we have to just give our employees one instruction, and that is to create a system so that when they're using a generative AI model, they look up into the URL of the browser they're in, and it should say the company's domain name, right? Like, company X GPT federal XGBT, FHS, like whatever it is, whatever organization, you create an internalized, and that's exactly, I think, what you were saying as well, like an internal version of this. And the benefit of that is that it's a super easy rule and it's very easy to identify, but it also creates a really easy way for an enterprise, an IT organization to prevent, like you said, it's very tempting to just be like, well, I've got ChatGPT here, right? It creates an opportunity for an IT organization to really focus on building firewall rules that create reminders to organizational employees, hey, that's not where we go for this. The other thing I think, so one, of course, just create an infrastructure that supports internal innovation with these tools that protects your data. And that's I say maybe it's simple, maybe it's not that easy depending on how bureaucratic your organization is in provisioning these internal systems, but it is a simple solution. But the other thing is it's more cultural than it is technology based, right? Like having the tech protected, sure. But one of the things that is most concerning about AI systems is a lack of intention when even building them. And so when your employees use a system, if the leadership doesn't realize that just by using a system, you're training it. Just by talking to a machine, you're training it on how to not only ask questions, but also to create answers. And if you are not really clear on your core values, on what you're trying to use that system for, the model can get confused about what truth is, what harmfulness is, what helpfulness is. And you really have to establish, so protecting yourself and risk, it looks very different in the world of AI. It's not just kind of cybersecurity and compliance risk, it's also organizational clarity. And I think that is going to surprise a lot of enterprises is how clear they need to be as a company about what they want to do and how they want to do it and how clearly they can articulate that to a machine so it can help amplify that work.
As a Gen Xer, it seems to me that there's just a mind shift in how leadership is going to change over the next few years and how the younger generations coming in, they understand things differently. They literally communicate differently, which is not by their mouths, it's by their thumbs. So sarcasm falls out of the conversation very quickly. But understanding kind of what those generational changes are in the workforce. What are some of the things that we have experienced ourselves at representing our generations? And then what do we kind of see coming in with the newer generations? Dale, you want to take that one first? Because Rebecca looks like she's ready to talk, but I'm going to make her wait.
Well, if I hear my son say like and subscribe one more time, I'm going to lose my mind. So,
I try not to be a crotchety old man. I really don't think that I am. I do notice some interesting things. I have kids like most people do. Mine are in their early 20s and mid 20s. And, one of the things I have not personally adapted to well is doing everything on my phone. I mean, I use my phone all day, but for the complex activities my kids do on their phone, like if I'm looking for airline tickets, I can't do it on my phone. I can't. I need to see a bunch of options. I need to see things, right? So I need more real estate. So I'm always amazed at the complex activities the new younger kids are able to do on their phones. It's because the expectation is I will just use my phone to do something. Now I went through the whole mobile shift. We did my business is a lot of mobile app development, all that sort of stuff. But my mind never shifted to doing more work actually on my phone. So that's interesting because AI will enable you to do more things. You can just you can just talk to the app and it will do something for you, right? So I see that being easier to do in the future. So that ease of use of a small amount of real estate is definitely something I'm seeing in younger people. And actually, the firm I retired from, the accounting firm, they the young accountants were much more comfortable doing that as well. So you do see a shift. That's a big shift, right? I think. Of course, laptops are the next level up, and everybody uses a laptop, which is I have no problem doing that. Expectations are of course different too, but that feeds into our earlier conversation where younger people don't want to be in the office all the time, and they're not good on. It. And so there is definitely, at least on paper, a looming labor shortage. So we'll see how that actually transpires. But AI could make up a lot of that slack in the workforce. So I don't know. I do think it's just expectational. That's not even the word. Expectations are different for younger people on how to interact with technology, right? How they do their work. That's really me. It's really interesting to me from a social standpoint, right? How people actually end up doing stuff because a massive maneuver, and people will do what they want to do. Like, well, businesses tried to force everybody back into the office. Really, I would say its generalization has not worked well. Um, so it's because people say, look, we're not doing that. And I think we're falling in this hybrid thing, right? And that hybrid's kind of working. But the expectational changes, is that really, we should check that out. Is that a word? If it's not, it ought to be.
It is now.
Thank you. So yeah, the younger people just have different expectations than people in my generation. And I have to admit, I think I'm the last boomer. I think so, but I don't have any problem using new stuff. I don't know. I've always been like
Well,
that.
you're a technologist.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's never been better from a technology standpoint. The stuff that you can do, it's never been better. How could you
Yeah.
complain about it, right? My gosh,
Tomorrow will be even better than today.
it'll be better. Honestly, I agree. Totally agree with that.
Yeah. I think we're long overdue for a culture shift, and I'm here for it. I'm ready. Like I've been in GovCon pretty much my entire career, and a lot of ex-military boomer kind of environment. So I'm excited to see what the next generation will bring. Um, you know, Thinking about this from the gap that you kind of stated, it's interesting because these younger folks have come with being able to do things on their phone screen, right? But also the apps and like the software and the platforms, the quality of these is much better than when we started. I mean, remember our QWERTY keyboards and our flip phones and stuff? We thought that was amazing. And so it's not a stretch to understand that like being able to do something from the face of an iPhone is normal or easy based on the quality and accessibility that we have now. But I think that regardless of age, I think it is our responsibility, obviously depending on what field you're in, to stay at least in pace with, if not, on par and ahead of the tools and tech that are available to us. And I think in our industry, I have seen, I have actually literally been attacked on LinkedIn on some of my posts because I'm always a cheerleader and champion for AI. And I've had people in my industry say, how can you be preaching this? Because it's going to take our jobs. It's going to replace us. And I think that the truth in that statement, because there's truth in that statement, is if you do not figure out how to use these tools and do some further, education and training to understand how to leverage them and augment them and how your organization plans to do the same, that's when you're jeopardizing your job security there. Because you're not going to make AI go away. So you have a choice. I have degrees and certifications, but by far the best core class I've ever taken, it was in community college, and it was Introduction to Microsoft Office. And it was Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and back in the day, they made you do Access. No one uses Access. I don't even know if it's still around. But hands down, best class I've ever taken because I use those applications and they've stood the test of time. I use them daily. The second best class that I've ever taken is Introduction to Prompt Engineering. When we're talking, do you want to talk about that time gap or that age or generation gap? That is that in real life, because I guess I fall into a micro generation, we call it called a zennial, right? Or I'm not a millennial and I'm not a Gen Xer, so I'm a zennial.
Generational purgatory.
Yes, I'm in 1983. We're apparently a weird little group, but whatever. I'll own that. But that's actually a really good representation because in my early, fresh out of high school years, I took this Microsoft Office course. And now here at, 40 years old last year, I took this prompt engineering course. You want to talk about night and day technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's our personal responsibility to continue to learn, have a learner's mindset, whether that be tools and tech or from a relationship and kind of humanistic approach, right? Where we have an outgoing generation and an incoming generation into the workforce, and being empathetic and cognizant and aware of what everybody uniquely brings to the table.
And that wraps up this special best of episode of the Optimize podcast. I hope these highlights have sparked new ideas, challenged old ways of thinking, and reminded you of the incredible opportunities within our field. If you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to explore all the full episodes we featured. There's so much more wisdom and depth in each conversation. You can find all our past episodes on our website or your favorite podcast platform. Thank you to all the incredible guests who have joined us so far, and to you, our listeners, for tuning in and supporting this journey. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with colleagues who might benefit.